Welcome, fellow historians, to a journey beyond the known chronicles of the Imperium. We often speak of Paul Atreides, the rise of the God Emperor, and the scattering. The forgotten lore, decipher the cryptic symbols, and piece together the epic sagas that shaped humanity's destiny among the stars. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss our first expedition into the deep past. The spice isn't the only treasure Arrakis holds.
They were never queens. Never empresses. Never gods. Yet every god who rose through their hands. In the shadows of empire, beneath thrones and banners, a sisterhood whispered to fate itself, and dared to correct it. Not with armies. Not with fleets. But with bloodlines. With memory. With patience measured in centuries. They called it guidance. History would call it manipulation. From the first sparks after the Butlerian Jihad, to the coming of the Kwisatz Haderach, the Bene JESS did not ask what will happen. They asked something far more dangerous. What must happen for humanity to survive? And when prophecy resisted them, when fate slipped their grasp, they did not retreat. They declared war. A war not against emperors. Not against houses. But against destiny itself. And this war is older than Arrakis. Much older. History remembers empires by their banners. Gold. Crimson. Black. But the true rulers of humanity wore no colors at all. They moved in silence, behind House Atreides, behind Harkonnen, behind the throne of the Padishah of House Kwisatz. Always present. Never seen. The Bene Gesserit understood something others feared to face. That humanity does not drift forward by chance. It is shaped. Pressed. Corrected. After the Butlerian Jihad shattered thinking machines and outlawed artificial minds, humanity stood exposed, brilliant, fragile, and dangerously emotional. Chaos waited in every generation. So the Sisterhood stepped in. They would replace machines with memory. Replace calculation with instinct. Replace randomness with design. Across centuries, they bent bloodlines like molten metal. They seeded prophecy among the freemen of Arrakis. They whispered myths of the Lee Sen al-Gaib long before Paul Atreides ever breathed desert air. All for one purpose. The coming of the Kwisatz Haderach. A being meant to see where they could not. To guide humanity past extinction. But fate has a habit of resisting those who try to master it. And when the Sisterhood's perfect plan finally moved, it did not obey. And that is where the Real story begins. Long before Arrakis became a battleground of faith, the universe had already learned a terrible lesson. Thinking machines had ruled humanity once. Cold logic. Perfect calculation. Soulless certainty. And when humanity finally rebelled, when the Butlerian Jihad burned silicon mines from existence, it did more than end a war. It scarred the species. No machines to predict the future. No algorithms to chart probability. No artificial gods to lean upon. Only humans remained. Flawed. Emotional. Unstable. Out of that wound, new orders rose. Mentat replaced computation with human cognition. Navigators drowned themselves in melange to glimpse folded space. And the Bene Gesserit chose a darker path. They would turn the human body itself into a machine. Not metal and wire, but flesh and nerve. Memory and instinct. Obedience and control. The Sisterhood began as scholars of perception. Students of awareness. They learned how tone could command muscle. How breath could alter chemistry. How fear could be sharpened into a weapon. The voice was not magic. It was precision. Every Bene Gesserit sister carried within her the memories of countless mothers before her, an unbroken chain of lived experience stretching backward through centuries. No forgetting. No ignorance. only accumulation. This made them dangerous. And it made them patient. They looked upon humanity and saw not individuals, but trajectories. Bloodlines became equations. Marriage became a strategy. Love became leverage. Across the Imperium, daughters were placed like pieces on a vast board, into House Atreides, into Harkonnen, into the shadow of House Qreno itself. Every union calculated. Every birth recorded. All are moving toward a single convergence point. The Kwisatz had Arrakis. A mind that could bridge male and female ancestral memory. A consciousness able to look into places the Sisterhood could not enter. Past and future. Cause and consequence. To the Bene Gesserit, this was not ambition. It was survival. They believed humanity was drifting toward extinction, through stagnation, through chaos, through its own unchecked emotions. The Kwisatz had Arrakis would be the corrective force. The shepherd of the species. But there was a flaw. Human beings are not numbers. And bloodlines, remember. To ensure control, the Sisterhood did not rely on genetics alone. They planted belief. On Arrakis, among the freemen, they seeded legends of a savior who would come from the stars. The Lisan al-Gaib. A voice from the outer world. A messiah who would lead them to paradise. These myths were not meant to be fulfilled. They were insurance. If a Bene Gesserit ever needed refuge, authority, or obedience, Arrakis would provide it. Faith would do the work that force could not. Everything was prepared. Every variable is measured. Except one. Love. Lady Jessica, trained, disciplined, loyal, was ordered to bear a daughter. One more step in the breeding program. One generation away from perfection. She chose otherwise. She gave Duke Leto a son. Paul Atreides. And in that single act of defiance, fate shifted its weight. The Sisterhood had planned for centuries. But destiny had begun to improvise. And it would not ask permission. The Bene Gesserit had always believed control required distance. Observe, but never intervene too closely. Guide, but never touch the flame. Paul Atreides shattered that illusion the moment he survived. From the instant he endured the Gom Jabbar, the Sisterhood understood the danger. Not because he might fail. But because he might succeed too soon. He was not supposed to exist yet. Not as a male. Not with that lineage. Not with a mother who had crossed forbidden lines. Paul carried echoes meant for a future generation. And echoes are never quiet. When House Atreides was betrayed, and Arrakis fell to Harkonnen and the Emperor's Azar Dao-Kar, the Sisterhood expected chaos, but manageable chaos. A controlled collapse. Instead, the desert answered Paul. Melange opened his awareness. Dreams sharpened into visions. Time began to fracture. Past and future bled together. To the Bene Gesserit, this was a catastrophe. They had spent centuries preventing precisely this moment, a living prophecy awakening outside their command. A Kwisatz had Arrakis who did not belong to them. Worse still. Paul did not merely see the future. He saw them. He saw the Sisterhood's lies braided into history. Saw their breeding charts written in blood. Saw the cost of their patience. And he understood something the Bene Gesserit had never fully grasped. That once fate becomes visible, it becomes difficult to escape. The freemen did not see Paul as a tool. They saw him as fulfillment. The Lisan al-Gaib stepped out of legend and into flesh. Not because the Sisterhood commanded it, but because desperation made belief combustible. Every whisper planted by the Bene Gesserit now ignited. Every myth returned with teeth. Paul did not invent the prophecy. He inherited it. And inheritance is harder to deny than deception. The Sisterhood attempted course correction. Warnings were issued. Jessica was condemned. Containment was discussed. But none of it mattered. Paul's visions had already shown him the outcome. A holy war spreading across the stars. Banners soaked in blood. His name was screamed by fanatics who believed they were saving humanity. The Sisterhood recoiled. This was not salvation. This was annihilation by faith. For the first time in their long history, the Bene Gesserit faced a future they could not steer, only witness. Their war against fate had reached its breaking point. And fate had chosen a Messiah who could see the trap and still walk forward. Not because he desired power, but because every alternative was worse. Paul Atreides did not conquer Arrakis. He surrendered to inevitability. And in doing so, he turned the Sisterhood's greatest weapon, prophecy, into a force they could no longer disarm. The Bene Gesserit had tried to master destiny. Instead, they had given it a face. And it was watching them now. The tragedy of the Bene Gesserit is not that they failed. It is that they were right. Humanity was fragile. It did drift toward stagnation, extinction, and self-destruction. Left unguided, history collapses into repetition, war, collapse, rebirth, war again. The Sisterhood saw this pattern long before others dared to name it. And so they asked the forbidden question, is free will worth extinction? To the Bene Gesserit, choice was a luxury. Survival was law. Their breeding program was not cruel, it was utilitarian mercy. A slow violence meant to prevent a far greater one. They would prune humanity's future so the tree might live. But here lies the paradox. The moment you try to save humanity by removing its freedom, you stop saving humans. You begin manufacturing tools. Paul Atreides exposed this contradiction with terrifying clarity. As the Kwisatz had Arrakis, he became what the Sisterhood desired, a mind vast enough to see every path. Yet what he saw was not hope. It was inevitable. Every vision narrowed to the same conclusion, the jihad. The fire. The screaming believers. Paul did not lack power. He lacked escape. And in that truth, Frank Herbert delivers his deepest warning. Perfect foresight is not enlightenment. It is imprisonment. The Bene Gesserit believed that knowledge would grant control. Paul learned that total knowledge annihilates choice. When every future is visible, decision becomes an illusion. Action becomes obligation. Leadership becomes sacrifice. Paul ruled not as a god, but as a prisoner of causality. And the Sisterhood, watching from the shadows, realized too late what they had created. Not a shepherd, but a mirror. Paul reflected the ultimate consequence of their philosophy, a human so overburdened by destiny that he could no longer live as one. In trying to defeat fate, the Bene Gesserit had strengthened it. By naming prophecy, they made it real. By guiding bloodlines, they hardened pathways that could not bend. Their war against destiny did not end with victory or defeat. It ended with a revelation. That humanity cannot be saved from itself without losing what makes it human. Later, the Sisterhood would attempt correction again, through Alito II, through tyranny justified as preservation, through enforced stagnation disguised as peace. But the lesson remains. Control is seductive. Order is comforting. And the desire to protect humanity often becomes the excuse to dominate it. The Bene Gesserit was not villains. They were caretakers who loved humanity too much, and trusted it too little. And in the end, fate did not destroy them. It simply proved that no one, not witches, not messiahs, not even gods, can stand outside history and still remain human. The Bene Gesserit never sought thrones. They sought continuation. In a universe addicted to power, they chose patience. In an age of violence, they chose quiet control. And for centuries, it worked. Until it didn't. Their greatest fear was never Paul Atreides. It was what he represented. A future that could not be edited. A destiny that refused guidance. A reminder that humanity cannot be reduced to a project without becoming something else entirely. The Sisterhood declared war on fate, and learned that fate does not fight back. It waits. It allows belief to harden into prophecy. Allows caution to become control. Allows protectors to become architects of suffering. And when the moment arrives, it simply unfolds. On Arrakis, beneath the burning sky, the Bene JESS saw the truth too late. That the future cannot be owned. Only endured. And so the real warning of Dune is not about messiahs or witches. It is about us. About every system that believes it knows what humanity should be. About every hand that tightens its grip in the name of survival. Because the moment we decide the future must be controlled, we stop living in it. And history, as it always does, remembers the cost.